right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Monday, May 20th, 2019. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Newton Falls City Council. Please turn off your cell phones or set them to vibrate. Unless prearranged, public comment sections are limited to 3 minutes. We use a timer, and when the timer goes off, we ask you to complete your statements. The comment sections on the agenda is not a debate or a question and answer session. The first public comments is for agenda items only. The final public comments are on any subject you would like. And if your spectators are talking, we ask you to keep it quiet so people around you can hear you. Would the clerk please let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. And join me, remain standing, please, after the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight we have with us Pastor Chuck Campbell from the Delightful Evangelical Church. He will do the invocation for us. Pastor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let us pray. Almighty God, creator of the universe, provider and sustainer of life on this planet Earth, it is my honor, it is my privilege to bring before you this evening the officials of the city of Newton Falls, Ohio. And God, although we cannot see you and we cannot see where we are at from your perspective, you are looking upon us as though, coming to you in prayer, we are standing in the very throne room of God. And that gives us an awesome feeling of responsibility as we ask for you and ask for your blessing to be upon each and every one of these members here this evening. Father, I ask that as the various items are brought up for discussion, that you will grant wisdom to those who are making the decisions, that personal agendas might be set aside, that the good for the body of the city will be placed in forefront, that discussions will be held in such a way that everyone can understand and be satisfied with all sides being fairly presented. And Father, we pray that as the vote is taken on each of the items to be considered tonight, that your voice of the Holy Spirit will speak to the hearts of each of those making those decisions. God, the Bible tells us that you are the one who has set up governments in this world. You are the one who has allowed us to be born into the United States of America or to be a citizen of the United States of America. You are the one who has placed us in this very place at this very time for the purpose of making these decisions tonight. And so, Father, we thank you for that honor and that privilege of serving our country with a sense of pride in our patriotism, because we realize that in that sense we are serving our God with a sense of pride and patriotism to what we know as the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Thank you, Jesus, for coming into this world and showing us who the Father is through your own life, telling us all about him, showing us what he wants us to do and how we are to live and how we are to love our neighbor as ourselves and express that love to our Creator God. And thank you for your sacrifice that frees us from sin and would send us to hell if we did not have you as a sacrifice. But because of you, because of what you have done for us, because of your willingness to die for your creation and rise from the dead, we know that eternal life is ours from the moment we believe in you. And we trust, Lord, that each one here this evening has placed their faith in you. And we trust, Father, that because of that, we will be living our lives as an example for others to follow. Lord, tonight, as I am departing, I pray that your Spirit will remain upon these fine folks here this evening. Grant them your blessing, grant them good health, grant them safety as eventually they return to their own homes, and a sense of satisfaction that decisions they have made in the past have been completed and the decisions that will affect the future of the citizens of the city of Newton Falls will be also completed for the good of this community. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Campbell. Would the clerk please take roll?
Mr. Beer? Here. Mr. Alberini? Here. Mr. Stufford? Here. Mr. Bariak?
Here. Can I get a motion to go into executive session to talk about the candidates for the council seat? Second? No second? Oh, I'm sorry. Any discussion? Roll, please.
Alberini? Yes. Mr. Stufford?
Yes.
Mr. Bariak? Mr. Beer?
Yes.
We will be back. We have a motion to adjourn from the executive session and reconvene. Second? Second? I'll speak louder, okay.
I said,
Any dis-
Wait, I gotta take roll. Mr. Stufford?
Yes.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
yes.
All right,
I'd like to make a motion that Dave Davis be appointed Ward 1.
there's a motion to appoint Dave Davis to the vacant council seat. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think Mr. Davis has been in this community all his life. He's been a 16-year firefighter. His family has been here and run a successful business, and he's well-liked in the community. He has negotiating skills, and he knows a tremendous amount of people in the community. I think he would be a very calming effect on the city council. And that's why I'm nominating him.
Any other discussion?
I'd just like to say that we, in my opinion, have three very good candidates. So I would like everyone to know that whatever my vote is, that I think that every one of you are good people.
Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to say this. I'm also personal friends with Dave. Dave's a very fine man. You know, what I would say is this, is that we've got three great candidates who applied. It's been, you know, no one wants to make a tough decision. I'm willing to make a tough decision. One of the other candidates had a little bit more experience as far as grant writing and things like that goes, but I probably would keep the barn door open here for future events, possibly. But, you know, Dave's a good man.
Anything else? Roll, please.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes,
Mr. Beer?
No.
Mr. Alberini? No. Mr. Stufford?
Yes.
Mayor Waddell?
No. Any other nominations?
I would like to nominate Zach Savet for the position of First Ward Councilman.
Is there a second
Second.
discussion?
Well, I think Zach, and like I say, I think everybody that's come up here, I was impressed with all three candidates, but Zach has 11 years' experience on planning and zoning. He knows the city, he knows a lot of the laws, he probably knows more than most of us that are sitting on council right now, and I think he'll make an excellent person. You know, and as for, you know, anyone else, if Zach gets the position, then I hope that the other candidates will consider perhaps taking a board position or something like that. But I think Zach is the person that has the most qualifications.
I would like to say what sold it for me again is I'm friends with Dave and I don't know Zach all that well. Zach did have the grant writing experience for the parks, which I really, really liked a lot. And I think at the parks, we need all the help we can get. And also, I would encourage Dave to, you know, again, keep that door open because things may change in the future. But two great candidates. I'm pleased that they both stepped up to the plate, especially the spirit of this council has been a little rough the last year and a half to 2 years. And you're entering into a tough arena, no doubt about it. So that's my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I would like to correct one thing. There was three candidates.
Three candidates, I'm
and
sorry, yeah.
There was three good interviews, and I don't want to leave anybody out of that because we had three good interviews, so. Mr. Stimpert?
I enjoyed all three candidates. I think they all were very good at interviewing. Just because we choose one tonight, please don't be discouraged. As Mr. Alberini has said, please keep that door open. We'd love to have more help. We have committees that we need people on, you know, Parks and Recs and different things. So don't be discouraged if you don't make it today. Thank you.
Boriak?
I have nothing against any of the candidates either. It's just hard for me to fathom is that we just, last council, hired YSU for $30,000 to write our grants. I didn't know my job was to write grants, but if I need to write grants, maybe I'll take a course too. If I can get, you know, I didn't know a councilman's job was to write grants. But having the grant experience, maybe that's a blessing in disguise. I have nothing against any of the candidates either.
Anyone else? Roll, please.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Mr. Stumpert?
Yes.
Mr. Boriak?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Savet, if you would come up, the judge will give you your oath of office. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's my recognition for playing with them.
Okay, thank you. Do you want this?
Yeah. I can give it to David, so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, if you'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Zachary Sabat,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America,
I will support the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Charter and ordinances of the City of Newton Falls.
the Charter and the ordinances of the City of Newton Falls.
That I will not make any expenditures
I will not make any expenditures
of public money
of public money
otherwise than for adequate consideration
otherwise than for adequate consideration
and efficient service
and efficient service
to the City of Newton Falls.
to the City of Newton Falls.
That I will not be influenced
I will not be influenced
by any consideration
by any consideration
except that of merit and fitness
except that of merit and fitness
in the appointment and discharge of employees,
in that appointment and discharge of employees,
and that in all other respects
in all other respects,
I will faithfully and impartially
I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform
discharge and perform
the duties incumbent on me
the duties incumbent upon me
as a member of council
as a member of council
for the City of Newton Falls
for the City of Newton Falls
from May 20th, 2019,
from May 20th, 2019,
according to law
according to law,
to which I've been elected,
to which I've been elected,
according to the best of my ability and understanding.
to the best of my ability and understanding.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
My pleasure.
Does he have a council packet?
I borrowed your pen, Judge.
Thank you. You're efficient.
So if you do a scan tomorrow, it's not there. You know.
Just one thing, Councilman Savet, there is a packet in front of you. There's a lot of things on tonight's agenda. They may, you may not have any knowledge or history or information on them. If you wish to vote on those, you may do so. If you wish to abstain, please do so however you feel. But, don't feel obligated to vote just because you're sitting there and you may not have the knowledge, so. Any public comments on tonight's agenda?
Dave Davis, 42 West 9th Street. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Savet and thank the council for their time for interviewing me and considering my talents maybe or whatever it may be. But thank you. Thank you.
Katie Carl, 128 West Quarry Street. There are quite a few things on tonight's agenda, and congratulations, Mr. Zavat. I'm not going to speak about the ordinance compensation for zoning administrator. I will wait until the public hearing for that. I would like to know, we have 4 resolutions on tonight's agenda, rather than ordinances, and it's concerning to me that entering into a contract is a resolution, it's not an ordinance. I thought, per our laws and ordinances, we had to have contracts, it's $15,000, I believe, was the contract amount. We had to have that in the form of an ordinance, if I'm not mistaken. Anything over a certain amount of money had to be an ordinance. But that's a recollection, I could, and probably might be wrong. Anyways, there's a lot of things under resolutions rather than ordinances, and why, I guess is my question. Are we not doing ordinances for things so that they could have hearings on them, and people can question why, what for, and they can ask about them and talk about them. It's concerning that the different things that are changing, and the ordinances also that are on tonight's agenda under unfinished business, they're sponsored by the city manager. Nothing in the city charter or in the council rules does it state that the city manager can sponsor ordinances. When did that change? Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
William George, City of New Falls Electric Superintendent. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ordinance that you have tonight in front of you, the 2916. I just wanted everybody to know that I disapprove of this. You guys keep hitting my budget all the time. We're doing a rate study right now, and I'm afraid that we keep doing this, we're gonna affect our rate study. We're trying to lower our rates. I'm working right now with getting a new substation. I've been cutting costs there. We've cut pretty much $500,000 out of that budget already, trying to save money. I've been going for a grant for a chipper, which is $40,000 to try to help. I think that, I don't count on this money from the schools, but I think that, this money helps. Every dollar counts. I showed it, they probably still owe right around $42,000 to us. Which is not a lot, but it still adds up. I think that, and I did agree when we were talking about going to the school for the building, that I said it was okay to go ahead and waive this, but I think it was kind of like as a perk to benefit the city, so we would have, nice offices and stuff. I think we need to look at all this. Before you guys vote on us, do due diligence. I just want the residents, because the people are gonna be the one to pay for this. I just want you to look at that. It may affect our rate study, it may not. I don't know that. I can't say for sure, but I just want everybody to look at that, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, under reports, just a reminder that Memorial Day is next Monday. The parade starts at 10:30. Hopefully it'll be a nice day. And once again, I want to thank all three of the candidates for the First Ward council seat. It's nice to interview different people and talk with different people and see different ideas and thoughts, and I think we'll do all right. Attended a meeting there in the last couple of weeks on economic development with a few people. It was a very interesting meeting. Went to Ohio Economic Development Association meeting, and we talked a lot about site visits. And one of these days, we're going to do a little presentation on some of these things, and I think that once you understand how site selectors look at our community and other communities, it'll open your eyes on what we need to do and how we need to do to attract big business through site selectors. There's actually four ways to bring them in, or a site selector, a realtor, somebody just decides, hey, I want to go to Newton Falls and shows up and says, I want to build, or somebody has a friend and brings them in. Those are the four ways. And that site selector also works through the Youngstown Ward Regional Chamber, Team Neo, and the others. So there's a lot that goes on with that, and it was a really good meeting. I attended the Eastgate Policy Board meeting, and after the meeting, they had a meeting for small governments, and really a lot of good information. We got to sit around with the rest of the small communities, West Farmington, and some of the other townships, and talk about how the grants work for small villages, and just a lot of good information that I brought back, and we can look at and print some things out and try to figure out how we could get a little bit more for our dollar at the Eastgate level. I want to say thank you to Nancy Hoffman and to our city clerk for purchasing and buying the flowers for Veterans Park. And are those flowers in front of the city hall part of that too? Okay. All the flowers over at Veterans Park in preparation for the Memorial Day service over there. It looks very good. Thank you for your time and your volunteering. Mr. Savet, was there anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, just, my couple things that I know I'm gonna be, looking at doing along with city council members is, the roads, number one, and, quality of life components is my second other thing that I think I can directly affect, along with all the other items that, the city's been working on. And then also, I want to try to get some town hall meetings with the businesses within Ward 1, and then also the citizens to kind of gauge what, people would like to see, within my year and a half, that we have remaining on the term, and try to get some balls moving, in those directions.
Usually this is just for reports for your committees, but since tonight's your first night, I think maybe somebody would like to hear what you had to say. So normally this is just reports for your committees. Mr. Bariak.
I'd like to give my report from Eastgate, but I'd like to thank first all the veterans groups that put out the poppies this week, sold the poppies and put out the flags on all the graves. The Legion, the AMVETS, the VFW, these people do it every year. I can't name them all personally, but they do deserve a kudo. They never forget those that gave all. Now I'd like to go into Eastgate. This is going to be a lengthy project. I attended the first meeting, and what it is, we're going to be trying to work up a program so that we can ask for the money, how we can ask for the money to support ODOT measures to reduce deaths by 1% each year, fatalities. We're right in the initial stage. It's very complicated, and we just got in very lightly. They're talking about the old people, like we just had the old people, an elderly lady, 90 years old, hit the bank down there. That's one of the priorities. I don't know the answer yet, but the OVI task force, there's a lot of things that we're going to prioritize in order. We're going to work at it, all of the communities together, and put together a program where we can go ahead and try to get the money. I'll keep everybody updated. I'll be attending every meeting. That's about all I have, Mayor.
Mr. Stemper.
Yes, my fire board meeting will be on the 28th, if that doesn't change tonight. That's the next meeting. May numbers, as of May 20th, we've had year-to-date calls of 639. For the month of May, there's 105. City has 383 calls. The township has 170 calls, and 87 of those, 87 mutual aid calls. For, once again, year-to-date total of 639 It looks like we're going to surpass year's calls. And I just want to thank everybody out there for their support on the levy. Thank you.
Mr. Beer.
Yes, planning and zoning completed their work on the new zoning map, but they're going to have a public hearing coming up for that, and then if everything goes well, it'll be advanced to council for approval. And that's all I have.
Mr. Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity to fill in for you at the Newton Falls Class of 2019 valedictorian banquet and was able to speak a little bit and share with those young people. What a great group of people. I had to confess, though, Mr. Mayor, I was a C student. I wasn't in that type of caliber of class where they said, Mr. Alberni, you're valedictorian. So I was very humbled by speaking to a bunch of students who were much, much, much smarter than me. That was the first thing. The second thing is I did reach out to White Donuts, who is the franchisee for Dunkin' Donuts, for a possible meeting in regards to development on Route 5. I'm waiting a call back from that group of people to see if we can't do anything out there. And one of the things I want to keep in mind, too, and I'll keep this quick, is that the idea of Route 5 development is not to interfere with the existing businesses that we have in town because it's a total different demographic, different traffic pattern, people coming off the turnpike and things like that that don't normally come to Newton Falls but would have some place to go to out on Route 5. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. One thing that I did forget, and it's important, I didn't want to forget this, but this is, they're going to be taking census this year, and there are jobs open with the federal government for census takers. They pay between $14 and $32 a piece, and they might be as long as 2 years. And you can register online. I know the city manager is going to talk a little bit more about that when he speaks, but I wanted to let people know that if you want to be a census taker, you need a driver's license and don't have a criminal record, and you have to do a couple other things, but you can go online and fill that out, and it'd be nice to have some people from the community do that.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
In regards to your report? There's been much talk, I noticed online, about you taking online courses for economic development. Can you clarify that, please?
I've never taken an online course for economic development. I'm doing a certification program through the Ohio Economic Development Association. Those are all held in Columbus. They're all held in Dublin, at the Dublin Institute down there, part of Ohio University. So I do classes there. And then there are some other classes as you travel around the state. They hold them in different places, but nothing is online. There is a certification that you take at the end. There's a capstone where you develop a project for your community on how to, actually it's something that we would really need to do anyway, is to develop a program along with our other things that we have done to bring businesses in. And our strategic plan is a real important plan. I didn't realize that we had one because I've read it before, and for some reason I thought about it. I was looking at it the other day, and I remember now sitting down and talking about that and doing all those things, and I think there's some things we'd want to do, but yeah, there's nothing online. It's all in class with books and teachers and people from different companies and representatives and different parts of the government, so.
So you mean whatever on Facebook's not true?
No, nothing on Facebook is true. You gotta know that by now. All right, Ms. Bunsen.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of council. The Finance Director's report for the month of April. I have made some highlights on the report here. First and foremost, if you do call the Finance Department, we have upgraded our phone system, so you'll receive different messages. Option 1 for utility billing, Option 2 for the Finance Department, and Option 3 is for the Director of Finance. You can leave a voicemail and we will return it. The goal is definitely within 24 hours. If obviously we're in office, we'll answer the phones as quick as possible. But that is to provide better customer service to our residents and everyone. The next update is the Uniform Accounting Network. We're really working hard on that project, our department. The entire staff has attended over 14 hours of software training. I do want to inform council and the public that we are working on creating our first comprehensive annual financial report, which will take precedent of the UAN project, having a best audit as possible and getting the full disclosure of financial reports. This is something new to the city of Newton Falls. It's a lot of different reports. There's going to be a stats table, and so we're working really hard on that project as well as UAN. Tonight, we'll be discussing the 2020 tax budget, and then we'll have a public hearing about that. What I want to just briefly highlight in your packet is two things. End of April is obviously the income tax collection, the highest period. So for year-to-date gross income tax distributions that we've received from the Regional Income Tax Agency, you'll receive a report in your report. It's just a little table. So in 2019, year-to-date April numbers is $297,091.48. To compare that to 2018, the city received $268,444.72. So for this tax season, we have a slight increase in collections from April to April. Overall, the financial situation for the city at the end of April for all funds, and there are several different funds. The revenue for the month of April for all funds is $5,396,893.56. Disbursements for the month of April year-to-date for all of our funds is $5,371,812.60. And also, there is our monthly credit card report that you'll need to review and pass. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Attorney Fritz.
Thank you, Your Honor. Normally I don't have a report, but I want to talk about some of the issues that were raised here tonight. I'm not going to do this on a regular basis, but just for purposes tonight, they talked about why the city manager is sponsoring legislation, why it's happened. If you go to our administrative code, under 12102, the city manager, city clerk, director of law, finance director were considered council staff. And the city manager with council staff prepares the agendas. Items can be brought forth obviously from council, bring them on there. What we've done on and off in my 8 years, and even before me, is sometimes we put sponsors on, sometimes we don't. Since Mr. Lynch has been here, he's been trying to be very clear and conscious about making sure every time he's letting who the sponsor is. If it's council members, he puts it on. If it's somebody from the staff or him presenting it, he does. So that's how that comes out, where the city manager is presenting these type of things. The second item that she mentioned was so many resolutions. These are general. I'm going to give you a general rules. There are always exceptions to these general rules, but the general rules are when you pass the budget last November for this year, there's certain items you put together. You put so much, I'm going to use the word economic development, you put so much money into that. If the money being used is coming from something you've already budgeted specifically, we don't have to do that by ordinance. We can do it by resolution. If it's a line item that's available, every time he buys staples, every time he goes buys office equipment, he can go, oh, office equipment, we have $10,000 to spend, I'm allowed to spend $250. Now, having said that, that's how, when these issues come up on a regular basis, where either the city manager, the clerk, or myself make a determination, we look and find out whether what we're presenting can be by ordinance and resolution. If it's a line item where it's a specific item that's small enough, then we do have a resolution. If it's required by the specifics, if you look at the charter, there's 5 or 6 instances where we have to. If we're buying or selling property, if we're doing something with creating or moving a department or a position, those things by charter have to be by ordinance. Finally, when we talk about competitive bidding is generally $50,000, we have to get competitive bids. But there are exceptions in the Ohio Revised Code. One particular exception is for professional services. Professional services are such services that are so unique and so focused, and that we can't just, there's not enough people to go out and necessarily get bids. There may only be 1 or 2 people in the area that do that type of work. So as long as it's already been budgeted, it becomes the discretion of the city manager how he proceeds with those. So the city manager has been very conscious. He likes to put as much in front of you that he can. The reason you're seeing some more resolutions is because previous city managers haven't put it in front of you. They just write the check and bring the people in that got good work, and if they had bad work, they didn't hire them again. But now he's making sure he's bringing as many of these things forward to you, so you're seeing him in advance. That's why you're seeing more resolutions than we used to have. With that, I'm available for any questions on that or any other matter, gentlemen.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moran? First question I'd like tonight is why Mr. Fritz, did it take you 4.5 years to say that there was a conflict of interest between Mr. Alberini and myself on economic
You're
development?
totally in error.
What?
You're totally in error. I wrote it a month or so ago, but I also wrote it about 4 or 5 years ago. That was a repeat.
Why was he still on economic development then?
He's allowed to be. Oh, if you read the opinion I sent you, Mr. Bariak, he makes a decision if he believes he has a conflict or not. I don't sit there and judge him. I'm telling you that I wrote that opinion 4 or 5 years ago. We redid it as we came up with the annexation issues again. When we first started annexation conversations, I'm going to be roughly 5 years ago, we were looking at a very large, broad item because we didn't know how to do annexations. Over the course of our communication over time, he stayed out of everything, to my recollection, when we were back in the back room, until the annexation got to the point where we realized we're only able to annex around 440 acres, and his property and your property at the time was far removed from the area that we were dealing with. At that time, he became involved with the conversations. So you're saying that I didn't tell him long ago is incorrect. You're allowed to have your own opinion, but not your own facts. So be very clear about that. I told him 5 years ago. I rewrote it now because as Mr. DeCristofaro came in, we're going to look to expand past our annexation, which may include the property that you gentlemen own. That's why I gave you the courtesy of sending the second opinion.
Route 5 development.
Yes, sir.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
Why is he recusing himself from Route 5 development now?
I don't know.
Well, then why did you tell me that I should recuse myself from Route 5 development?
Because you own property out there.
I don't own property out there.
So do you own mineral rights to the property in Route 5?
Yes,
That's the property I suggested that you.
and I'm waiting for an ethics opinion to come back. How come that was real quick, I got that, boom, boom. And for 4.5 years, and when I asked you for an opinion about Mr. Alberini being taken off, and the mayor came back and said, October 17th, we made a motion to leave him on there. He was made aware that there may be a conflict. October 7th, the mayor said he'll be left on till the end of his term. And I came into the office and talked to you and Mr. Lynch. I still haven't got an opinion whether he was to be able to be taken off that January. You've never given me opinion on that yet.
As I've said to you numerous times, if you put your opinions in writing, direct to the city manager to come to me, I will see that that opinion gets written. Your requests for opinions are fast and furious, and they change by the day. Having said that, the opinions that you got are the ones that are necessary so this council can proceed and this city remains safe. I stand by my work.
Well, how can I work for this community when it takes this long to get an opinion?
You haven't
You
formally-
knew I wanted that opinion. I sat there with Mr. Lynch, and you said, I'll get it for you. Now, come on.
Which opinion are you asking for right now?
I'm asking for, when the mayor said, we're not to take Mr. Alberini off till the end of the term. We agreed to that. And they produced the paper. And I said,
Which
but
paper,
his
sir?
term,
There was a motion that Mr. Bariak made to keep Mr. Alberini and myself on to the end of our term.
right,
Okay.
which his term ended December 31st, 2017. He was sworn in again. He got reelected December, his new term started in January of 2018.
Okay.
I said, well, then we can take him off. I said, isn't that right? I said, can I have an opinion? You said, that's right. I'll look into that. I'll get you an opinion. I haven't got that to this day. How can I run and represent the people of this community with this kind of representation?
You certainly can. If you put it in writing, I'll give it back to you immediately.
I just want to say that both David Lynch and I can see what you said. Thank you for the clarification of the ordinances and resolutions. And I do see a lot more coming across our desk that's being approved. I wanted to thank you for you clarifying that for not only me, but for everybody out there, because I think there was a little bit of a misconception there as to all of the, that goes. Thank you.
Mr. Fritz, I'd just like to know, if I own a piece of property out on Route 5, I sold it, but I kept the mineral rights, would I have the right to sell those mineral rights to somebody else?
You would.
So then wouldn't it be true that that was still a piece of that property that I own? I just, if it's not real, if it's not, then I shouldn't be able to sell it. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Again, gentlemen, I stand by my opinion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor? A couple things. First of all, I got sidetracked here. I don't think the residents of your ward, Mr. Bariak, elected you to monitor Terry Alberini's property. And I think based on the last election where you only got 54 votes, I think you probably should change course and do something a little bit more positive. That being said, we talked about a dog ordinance here a couple weeks ago in regards to an incident that Chief enlightened me of. You got any further information on that?
I've pulled the ordinances from two other communities, and while they can't be breed specific, I expect to have it probably in the next meeting on there. There is some suggestions I may have that we may be better off to enforce some of the ordinances we have. We have a leash law, and that's alone sufficient in order to proceed. I'm not sure we want to take the additional steps to declare certain dogs vicious. We also have there's some state law that applies that we may be able to use. I don't want to put an ordinance on to overlap other ordinances and other rules, so I want to get a little bit more time. You had asked for that in another matter last Thursday. I haven't had a chance to go further with them.
I understand. And I will say this too, in regards to the reruns on Route 5, I do respect your opinion. I have abided by your opinion. I have not strayed off from that opinion whatsoever. If my fellow councilman feels that's detrimental in him doing his job, then he should probably take that to his personal lawyer and address it that way. So, thank you.
Can I have a second address?
For the mineral rights for Mr. Bariak, there is a parcel ID number registered with the county auditor,
There was, I don't have it in front of me.
but there is one.
There was as of whenever I wrote that opinion, sir, I think the opinion might be 2 weeks old.
And also to change, eliminate, or add committees, it does require 4 votes.
That was what my opinion, we're waiting for a second
Thank you.
opinion.
Mr. Bariak?
Mr. Alberini has recused himself, as I have, until I get an opinion from, I've already had my lawyer say that it's not investment property that I kept for investment. It's just, and I sold it, and it's development property. So I have nothing to do with the development of that property, and I will recuse myself. But what I can't understand is, how do you separate economic development? It's confusing to be off just Route 5. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. And either Mr. Alberini recuses himself from economic development or he doesn't. You gave the opinion, voting, participating in discussions, participating in deliberations, making recommendations, providing advice, and formally and informally lobbying. Now, are we tape recording every meeting and everything that goes on with that committee? How do we know what's going on? How does the public know what's going on?
Mark, if you read the entire opinion, you're going to find a section that indicates that there are certain things. Every time you vote on something, let's say you vote on to reduce the taxes in Newton Falls, you benefit by it because you're a councilman. It has to be a personal matter that goes directly to him. If you read the entire opinion and the conclusion. So if we're talking about whether you're pregnant or not, that's not as simple. If that was, we wouldn't have any lawyers. Okay, it's more complicated than that. If it's talking about development on your property or his property, it immediately and independently helps him. Even if it may help the whole city, it still helps him independently or you independently. That's why you have to be cautious. If we develop a piece of land going south, it helps the city. It helps you. But that's economic development he's allowed to be involved with and you're allowed to be involved with. It has nothing to do with your personal property. If you read the entire opinion, particularly the summary, you'll find that you are allowed to vote on certain things as long as it doesn't directly help you personally and no one else.
Oh, okay. Did we not do the due diligence on Mr. Alberini's property already?
I don't know.
Did we not do that with Mr. DeCristofaro? Did we not do the due diligence on Phase 2?
I don't know.
We didn't?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, well, on April 7th in the Tribune, did Mr. Alberini not make a statement under safety gear, that he was gonna hold on to his property to see if he couldn't get sewer out there.
I'm not sure why you're asking me questions to
No,
talk to
no,
Mr.
I'm
Alberini.
just saying, I'm
Wait,
just saying, where
is
do we
there a
draw
question
the-
there, sir?
Where do we draw the appearance, and where do we, I'm not trying to take Mr. Alberini, I'm just saying, economic development is economic development.
As I repeat to you,
When have you crossed the line, sir?
I am not the judge, jury, and executioner.
I'm not either.
Let me finish, sir. I wrote an opinion as a courtesy to council. It's a courtesy to you five. The whole idea is, my job as lawyer is to make sure that the city doesn't get in trouble, and because none of you are lawyers, when there's something that may come up and may be a problem, I should identify it as best I can. I should protect you as individuals because you people are not supposed to know all this stuff. I wrote the first opinion about 5 years ago when development started. I rewrote
I
it.
didn't see it. I wasn't on council 5 years ago.
It may have been 4 years ago, but you were in council because you were part of the annexation conversation, sir. So having said that, I rewrote it because it's a new issue that came up again. At that time, Mr. Stimpert was definitely not on, but this time he is. It's a courtesy to him. I don't know what he owns out there. He might own 150 acres I'm not aware of. It's not my job to know exactly where, but I do know as we move through this things that he had property there and you had property there. So it's a courtesy.
No, I don't have property there, sir.
You own mineral rights, sir. You can argue with me all you want about property. In the state of Ohio, it's property.
Well, we'll see what the ethics state says.
Anything else?
Mr. Lynch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, and members of council. Just a couple points I wanted to highlight. The city manager's report talks about various items I did want you to have called to your attention, but a couple of them should be highlighted, and one of them is, and I want to thank Councilman Stimpert, this is an idea that was discussed, I would say, back in December of 2018, and we now, I guess you could call it the Stimpert Plan. Ohio Valley is now picking up waste in terms of bulk items, even if the person that puts the bulk item out has not made a phone call. And you may recall you had received some complaints from constituents, and the problem was that Ohio Valley was saying, well, yeah, there's a couch out there, but nobody's called to say we should pick up the couch. And as a result, the couch would sit out there for a couple of weeks, which became an eyesore. Ohio Valley now is picking up all bulk items. The address is being identified by the driver, and the owner of that property is being billed for that bulk item. Period. End of story. We want people to put their bulk items out, but they are going to be billed. It's not appropriate to put your couch or refrigerator out and then just think, oh, well, they'll pick it up and no one will be the wiser. It's not going to work that way anymore, and I appreciate your intervention. The tour of Fairlawn coming up, and Madam Clerk, I think that's June 7th. I want to encourage all the members of City Council to get to that tour. We're going to go to Fairlawn, and we're going to go to Wadsworth. And the fiberization of Newton Falls is essential to our future and our economic development. And eventually, significant legislation regarding methods of financing, regarding the nature of the project, the design of the project, it's going to be in front of all of you. And so I'm pleased encouraging all of you to contact the clerk's office so you can participate in that tour so that you have full knowledge of what you're being asked to vote on. The mayor talks a little bit about the census. And there's a little note at the end portion of the written city manager report. My intention is to be very aggressive in encouraging the city to participate in the census. Our numbers are very important to us. And so my intention is to launch a campaign that's called Newton Falls is Counting on You. And I'm asking all of you to be ambassadors as it relates to the census. We have access to more government funds and programs if all of our folks that live in this community are counted. The mayor is working hard to help us find other people to participate in terms of those that are taking the census. And it's come to my attention that the governor has a committee related to the census, and I've asked the mayor to participate by applying for that position. It will be important to us. The census is just not a thing for us to gloss over every 10 years. There are a lot of things that are determined by the population count, and we should make sure we do that. The last thing I wanted to highlight in the report is that I'm launching a campaign called Fix It or Lose It. And what I mean by that is, we have some homes in Newton Falls that have been allowed to become in dilapidated condition. I'm not going to identify them specifically, but we are going to be taking some legal action in conjunction with the law director to make sure these people either fix up their homes or they lose their homes and we demolish them. I'm anticipating that sometime here in 2019, you're going to see demolition of homes. We can't allow these beautifully manicured homes in Newton Falls that are kept up so nicely to be, to have the goodwill from that hard work destroyed by a blighted home right next door. And that doesn't mean we're not sensitive to the financial problems that individuals are having, but some of these homes aren't really owned by anybody. In fact, we're going after homes that are vacant and they're collapsing within themselves. We've got to do something about it. We're going to be very, very aggressive in that regard. And the net result, I think, will be a real positive. But in any case, we will be very aggressive. And again, I appreciate the support of the council as we launch into that program. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report for this evening.
Any questions for the city manager, Mr. Alberini?
Mr. Lynch, I had a conversation, of course, this weekend, myself and the mayor did, with Mr. Ruska from the ball fields. I didn't get a chance to talk to Chief again, in regards to the portable toilets being tipped over one more time. And Mr. Ruska said they were staked to the ground, so somebody obviously came by and made it a point to pull the stakes out and tip them over. I don't know if we can add more cameras to the park over there, but it seems to be probably a weekly incident.
Yeah, we are taking some action in that regard, Councilman Alberini. The chief and I have been working together as relates to the camerization of the parks. Some of the cameras were taken out of commission due to some vandalism, but the chief and I have worked together to identify the appropriate contractor for the reinstallation and protection of those cameras and for the prosecution of those that commit these crimes. You know, some kids, I shouldn't say it's just kids, I'm not sure who does it, but some folks might refer to this as some shenanigans, or boys will be boys. These are crimes. This is vandalism. And when a porta-john becomes unavailable because of it's been tipped over or whatever's happened, it's putting somebody else out, and we are going to be doing something about it. The chief and I have talked a little bit this morning about the idea of how those porta-johns can be stabilized. If he wants to in his report, he can talk about that a little bit more, but there are ways to make sure that doesn't happen. But make no mistake, it's not funny, and we're going to make sure that we attack that issue.
Mr. Stimpert?
Oh, yes, I just wanted to. I don't know if anybody has driven around town, but I just wanted to give you kudos on these signs that say, for the roads, resurfacing is scheduled for the summer of 2019. I think if you look in several areas, you'll see the roads have signs at the end of them. And we've also consciously came up with a plan to, for next summer, we can take off the 19 and put to 2020. So not all the roads are getting done this year, but we do have several that are getting resurfaced in the summer of 2019. The other question I had was the banners. It's more of a clerk question, but are we going to have those for Memorial?
I was assured last week he would have them today or tomorrow, so yes.
Okay. And then I just wanted to reiterate, if you would, the 10:30 a.m. parade for Memorial Day on Monday. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Lane's on here. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I had a just quick thing on the dilapidated structures. Have you approached the Trumbull County Land Bank to utilize some of their dollars within the city for that purpose?
The answer to that is yes and no. The mayor's actually had extensive conversations with the land bank, and we're in the process of actually acquiring some vacant properties. The land bank monies, I have talked with some folks from the county in general in that regard, but one of the things we have to do is dot our i's and cross our t's, so we have time in order to take advantage of those dollars, and we'll do so. But one of the things I want to make sure we do is that we make
a loud statement that reverberates throughout the community of those people that don't want to maintain their properties. You don't have to travel very far from this building to find a couple of these homes. And we don't want to take property away from someone who needs to put a couple $1,000s to take care of this, that, or the other thing, a roof or some structural issue. What we're talking about are homes that are monstrosities. We're talking about homes that are abhorrent to the idea of human life. They're so dangerous that, they'd be the subject of a Stephen King novel. And I think that if we can consolidate those efforts in a way that the rest of the world, media that are present, can have some reportage as to what we're trying to do and get the word out there, the footsteps of Madam Justice heading up their front path to demolish that house will either spring them into action or allow us to move forward in a fairly expeditious fashion. I want those houses to come down so that the people paying their taxes and maintaining their garden beds will feel that the city cares about them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Lynch, to kind of go along with the question there, in the past year or so, I have talked about, and this kind of goes along with why we are trying to acquire the property. The city spends a lot of money every year cutting the grass on those vacant lots. Just drive down Parkland Road in Warren and look at all the lots that are 2 feet tall. It looks terrible. And I'm going to applaud the city clerk for taking time out of her days and throwing on her work boots and blue jeans and getting out there and, keeping things under control right now for us. And, we spend a lot of money doing these things and we're not recouping it. And that's the purpose of buying these lots or getting the lots through the land bank, is so the city can maintain those. Once they become ours, the city can use their equipment to maintain those lots, and we don't have to pay somebody to do them every other week. So that's part of it. There's a house that's in very disrepair on one of the nice streets in town, and it says no trespassing, it belongs to the land bank. And, the land bank doesn't come out and cut the grass either. They've got a nice program out there, but, we have to maintain it. And there's properties out there right now that have $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 of assessments on the properties that we will never recover. We will never recover that money. So I think it's important that we do this. Mr. Bariak has mentioned many, many times about being aggressive with landlords and with those kind of things, but no one has ever proposed any legislation and nothing has been in front of council to do any of these things. I think that in order to, we're looking at, a couple of years ago when we were in Columbus for an OML meeting, they talked about a nuisance and what classifies a nuisance and when a landlord or a property owner becomes a nuisance. And I think we need to look with the law director and the city manager and look at what classifies a nuisance and when does a property owner or landlord become a nuisance, and cite them and do what we need to do, whether it's fine them or whatever. And I think this fee that we charge for cutting this grass, we need to raise that fees up. Instead of charging them 40 or 50 bucks or whatever it is they cut it, it was in a paper a couple of weeks ago, somebody just charging $200 a shot. We may not get it back, but there's a lot of properties that we go out and cut that are owned by people that are living in the properties, and they don't cut the grass. And they'll pay the bill after you cut it, or it's owned by a local businessman, and after you send them the bill, they pay it. Well, I'm getting tired of sending our people over there to do the job that they should be doing on their own. So I think it's time that we look at declaring things a nuisance, and how do you take care of those people who are habitual offenders. Brett cited some of those same properties year after year after year after year. And we don't need to do that anymore. I think we're better than that, and I think it's time for people to take responsibility for their own properties. And, I realize too that some people don't have the financial wherewithal to make their house look like a Taj Mahal, but you can certainly clean up around the yard and cut the grass. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up with the nuisance laws and stuff that are on the books in the state of Ohio and how we can apply those here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that you recognize me again on this point. I want to mention something that's related to what you've been referring to and what Council was asking about. We're not only going to be aggressive in seeking demolition of the houses that are they're declared to be a nuisance by proper authorities, and then our efforts are in a legal sense called into the question so that we can do what's known as abating the nuisance, and demolition includes abating the nuisance. But junk vehicles, that is also on our radar screen in a very significant way. The folks in Newton Falls, if you've got a vehicle that's in your yard, it's got to be on a hard surface. If you got a vehicle that isn't currently licensed, it's a junk vehicle. There are some exceptions to the law, but let's not kid ourselves. We all know what a junk vehicle is and what it looks like. That's actually the term that's in the Ohio Revised Code. It uses the term junk vehicle. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that little planter in your front yard is actually a 68 Mustang that's rusted into a bunch of nothing, and we want it out of your yard now, and we'll be taking legal action to do so.
One more question. What is the status of the property on Route 5 at the northeast corner there?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, we are the proud owners of that property. It has been titled in the name of the city of Newton Falls.
So when Dunkin' Donuts calls, we've got a spot for him.
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Barr,
Are we going to be able to get them,
would you address the chair?
yeah, Mayor, are we going to be able to get the money to clean that up?
There is a state statute. We are working right now as a city to classify the property as what is called a Class C piece of property. If we can get the classification, we're doing the legwork and all the necessary research to, and the paperwork to get a Class C certification. I believe we can do so from the research that we've seen so far. If we get the Class C, then I believe that the state's going to cover the whole cleanup.
One more question. We had discussed something about, once we took the property over, that would benefit our businesses in town. Are we going to make a decision on that?
If it's what I think it is, I think it's certainly up to the city manager to do that.
Mr. Lynch?
Was that an intentionally vague question, Councilman?
Well, I'm not gonna,
Councilman, you're referring to the property at Route 5 and Route 534 that Councilman Alberni was talking about that we now own.
Wasn't my property, John.
no, I'm not talking, is it,
And what you're referring to is the fact that there was a fellow who operated a food truck on that property. He doesn't have a contract with the city of Newton Falls, and the question is, should we allow him to operate the food truck there? I anticipate coming up with a response to that and answer that. We just got title of the property on Friday, so my expectation is I'll be able to answer that by Friday of this week.
thank you.
I'm sorry, you said Class C?
Yes.
Is that, could you give a brief explanation of that, just
A
because I
Class C
don't?
certification, and I don't have all the information right. Could
You
you?
don't?
Sure.
Okay, please.
Sure. Yeah, what it means is the state of Ohio certifies that it's an abandoned former gas station location that has been officially, and the terminology they use is orphaned. That is, that the person that was originally responsible for the operation of the gas station is no longer in the picture. The reason the mayor and I are so optimistic in this regard is that the station in question was operated by Texaco. There was another owner of the property, but Texaco actually never took title to the property. And so the person that did have title to the property has passed away. Therefore, we anticipate it will fall into an orphan category, and the state of Ohio not only will pay for the digging up of the tanks, but will pay for the remediation of the soil, and will pay for all of the engineering costs. And to answer your question again, Councilman Bariak, I expect that we'll have that money to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any changes to tonight's agenda?
I did, Mr. Chair, if I could be heard.
Yes.
In light of the opinion having not emanated from the second opinion from Attorney Sopkovich related to the 4-vote question, I would ask that any agenda items related to committee assignments be pulled from the agenda this evening.
I'll make that motion.
We don't need to make a motion, he can pull that, so we, pulling number 7?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Is Chuck Lane not gonna make a here.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't see him here, so I just.
Well, I just assumed, but I just wanted to,
yeah, by the way, my apologies, I should have addressed the agenda in that regard. Mr. Lane had a personal matter, and he asked me this morning if he could appear at a different time. I said yes, without having asked you, and my apologies to you, but I assure you that that wouldn't be the case if there weren't good reason.
all right, thank you.
Do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the May 6th regular meeting? Second? Second. Discussion? Roll, please.
Mr. Albertini?
Yes.
Mr. Stenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrier?
Yes.
Mr. Savett?
Abstain.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the May 13th special meeting?
So moved.
Second? Discussion? Roll, please.
Mr. Stenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrier?
Yeah.
Mr. Savett?
Abstain.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Albertini? Yes.
All right, we have some public hearings tonight. I'd like to open up the public hearing on ordinance 2019-13. It's compensation for the zoning administrator. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? Please state your name and address.
Katie Carl, 128 West Quarry Street. The compensation for a zoning administrator, this ordinance is just that, just a compensation change, and it states that in your ordinance. There's no changes to the title of the position as a supervisory position or anything else, which cannot be done, which was talked about at the last meeting, because it's a charter change, and you can't do that with a charter. And I noticed that one of the councilmen abstained from voting, and which I don't understand why, because there would be no reason for anybody to abstain from voting, because that would be a conflict of interest, because no councilman or a person could get that position, because the conflict of interest, no councilman can get any emoluments or contracts with the city, even if they don't vote on it. But my question is, any changes with this, I hope you're going to talk about with this ordinance in regards to not just compensation, but the amendments you were going to make or look at as far as the title of this position. We don't need to pay someone that kind of money. If you're going to advance the hours, that's great, but how about do a gradual, make it $16, $17 an hour. That's quite a chunk of change. And there's a lot of people. You're getting this position right up there with our supervisors of our city. What a slap in the face to them. And there's not a clear job title or job explanation for what this person is going to be doing. Yes, I know, that's up to the city manager, okay? But how about an explanation? Because it's not in the charter, it can't be changed, but it's still not in the charter. There's no explanation here on this ordinance. It is just for pay, as it states. How about an explanation too, attached to the ordinance? That way, there's no question from anybody. Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak for or against ordinance 2019-14, amending the pay ordinance in reference to meter readers and street laborers? Seeing none. Anyone wishing to speak for or against ordinance 2019-15, the annexation contract? All right, under new business, with the clerk. I don't have a number 4. Let me look at the other page. Sorry. Look at the one you gave me. It's not on the original. Sorry. Public hearing on resolution 29-2019, the alternate tax budget. None again? Okay.
No, I have a question on that. Is this, the alternate tax budget is, Katie Carl, 128 West Quarry, I beg your pardon. There's no wait to look that up. So I'm sorry, I am questioning the finance director. Is this something that you put forth every year for them to approve or disapprove? I'm trying to go from memory here. And I know you can't answer me, so forgive me, but these are just questions for when you explain to the rest of council. That you put forth to say, okay, this is what we're gonna, the breakdown of what the financial and what I believe our budget is gonna be for this year that we'll have to take and expend in our taxes. Thank you.
Would the clerk please read ordinance 2019-13 by title?
An ordinance establishing compensation for the zoning administrator for the zoning of North Falls, Ohio.
Is there a motion to accept ordinance 2019-13?
Make that motion.
Second?
Second?
Discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm really not, I need some clarity on this, this position as far as I go. I really don't know the requirements that you've laid out. I think we had them in the last meetings, like an associate's degree or something like that. I seen something, did I see something like that or not?
Yeah, I sent a rather detailed email.
Okay, here's my,
Very good, very good.
yeah, I did see it to a degree. Here's my suggestion, okay? I would like to see, if we hire somebody, I'd like to see somebody with a planning degree, probably a bachelor's, who is well-versed in urban planning, like they do in Cleveland, Akron, whatever. Someone who has a background in that comes in that's already qualified. I would venture to say that if you do advertise with this type of money that we're offering, to Katie's point, that I suspect that you would probably get a very wide range of interest from the surrounding counties to come into Newton Falls and maybe put in a resume for this position. So I apologize, I did read that, but I'd like to see something, I'd like to see, us kind of expand those qualifications. I just don't want to see a zoning administrator, but a zoning and planning, urban planning, regional planning, something along those lines, if possible.
By the way, it might be recognized in that area, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The right bundle is what you search for, and that's an appropriate element of that bundle of qualifications. And we may get the kind of resumes that fill some of these things. The item that I sent all the members of council talked about what some of the preferred areas are, and I'm hoping we get that kind of response. We certainly didn't when we published an ad. My gosh, I guess we did that about 3 months ago when we published another ad. But that's one of the reasons behind making this a real professional, full-time position. Especially when you talk about planning, the enforcement of the community, that person has to have some sort of idea as to what is good for planning the community, because if you're seeing where the problem areas are, you begin to get a sense of what's appropriate for the community going forward. So if someone's got a degree in planning, in addition to some of these other areas, that would be a big boost. But I will tell you that my experience is it's still tough. This salary, people with those kinds of degrees are few and far between. So I'm hoping that's the case, but I'm certainly looking for it.
Counsel? Mr. Beer?
Well, I'd like to say that I agree that creating this position is kind of a slap in the face to all the different department heads. And also, I'd like to say that I think that we need a zoning department. We need to do things to clean up the city. But I want to see somebody with a degree, if we're going to create a position like this. And also, when we hire a police chief, council sits down and interviews. When we hired the finance director, council sat down and interviewed. I think council should have the say as to who gets hired, and we should interview people and do it just like we do with the police chief. I don't feel that it should be just the city manager's position to hire the person who goes in that position. So, for me, I'm not against it, but I think we need to relook at what we're going to do with it. And I just don't feel that we're ready to vote for this tonight.
Mr. Bariak?
I want a clarification on this. Is this going to be a separate department? With this now, to the law director, this is now not a separate department?
By charter, we're required to have a zoning department.
Is this a separate department, sir?
No, this is to fill the zoning department.
I couldn't hear you, Mr.
It's to fill the zoning department as the charter laid out.
I don't have any problem with what Mr. Beer said about us interviewing him. Do you have any problem with that, with us helping you interview him, Mr. Lynch? What your personal intake on that, sir?
Yeah, the charter of the city requires that the appointment be made exclusively by the city manager.
Well, then I hadn't researched that, sir. Okay, what I'd also like to say is this. Right now, we have a lot of intelligent people coming out of college with master's degrees in specific fields. Surely we can test the water, and we ought to be able to get someone that maybe would like to start out, and we could see, couldn't we just see that with the ad, Mr. Lynch?
Well, yeah, I'm publishing.
That's,
I'm publishing advertisement,
Well,
and
is there-
you may recall, I think there was something like 30 different bullet points on the description of the position. It listed basic requirements, and it listed desired requirements, and it listed mandatory requirements. And I'll seize this opportunity in responding to your question, Councilman, by saying, yes, we're going to publish, and obviously, like anything else, we'll see what happens. But I want to just address the idea that something would be a slap in the face. Does anybody here think it's less important to maintain the construction values of our community, the code enforcement of our community, the safety of our community, and the health of our community is somehow less important than maintaining our electric department, or our sewer department, or our various other departments? They're all important. And part of the problem, I think, is when I see this reaction, oh, it's a slap in the face, a slap in the face. We haven't treated this area important enough, and I'm hoping that we do so.
I asked a question, may I continue to have the floor for one more?
Okay.
Mr. Lynch, I'm not gonna step out on a limb, because I'm not stepping out on a limb. The electorate that I'm talking to in this community is exactly what you're saying. They want this town cleaned up. They want to have a nice, safe, pleasant-looking community. They don't want to look at somebody's junkyard. They want some aggressive action taken. And I don't feel that we're mistreating the supervisors in one bit. As a matter of fact, that we better get ready to treat this man with carpal tunnel, because he'll wear out about 12 pencils. It's been let go through the past administration for so long that we need to do something drastic. Thank you.
Anybody else on the first address?
Mr. City Manager, is this person going to be more in the office and doing the planning items that would require a degree? Or are they going to be out in the field more so, doing the inspections, and to your point of the solid waste as well, through the health department, doing those types of inspections where it might not require a 4-year college degree?
Well, first of all, let me address that in two ways, because I think it touches a little bit on the question that Councilman Alberini asked about trying to find someone with a degree. We want the very best person for the job, and that's who will get appointed to this job, the very best person. But the position's got to be filled. For a long time, it hasn't been filled. As I mentioned to you, I had hired someone on the part-time basis That individual quit the first day, and quite frankly, the mayor and the city clerk haven't been given enough credit. You know, people keep saying, gee, you're doing a great job with all the orders on the grass and things of this nature. Things have been happening while I've been the acting code enforcement officer, but without the mayor's help and the city clerk's help, none of that would have come to fruition. And they have really been doing yeoman service in that regard. And it's not in any of their job descriptions either. I signed the paperwork. To get specific to your question, yes, I would say this job, at least in the initial stages of it, is more the field work. Because quite frankly, the field work's been neglected. I don't want somebody sitting in their office. What I'm hoping we can do is have some of the office technology mobilized so that someone who's doing field work can actually get the office work done at the same time. What I mean by that is many of these cities have gone to these specialized iPads where you're out at the scene, you can actually work from the iPad, have the notices sent to the property owner by pushing a key on the iPad itself instead of the old way of going back to the office and pulling out a file drawer. Well, look, you probably know more about zoning enforcement than anybody in this room, right, given your prior experience. And it's a big problem. Now, that doesn't mean the planning side is neglected, but look, we did hire someone from Youngstown State University not only to help us with grantsmanship, but also help with this economic development and with planning. This town has enough problems that we could probably use a full-time planner and a person who's in the zoning department. But to answer your question more directly, yes, I think there'll be more emphasis on the field work.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lynch, just a couple of things. In the past couple of years, we have talked about stepping up the code enforcement to do certain things, and I do not wish to throw the judge under the bench or the prosecutor under the bench, but I'm sitting on the bench. But there have been a lot of questions over the past 2 or 3 years on zoning enforcement and what is enforceable and what's not enforceable. And, you know, there are so many things out there, and one of them is, go back to the spouting issue. And we've talked about all these different things where spouting falls off the house, and we try to get it put back up, and we meet with resistance. There's no spouting on the house whatsoever. I understand that. You can put things out there not to have spouting. But if there's spouting on the house and it's fallen off, you need to put it back. We can't seem to get that accomplished. There's so many little things that happen that we just, you know, we keep meeting with resistance on a lot of small items as to whether they're going to be enforced or not. The other thing is the previous zoning inspector, most of his time is in this time of the year, the spring, the summer, the fall. The winter, there isn't much to do. Do we need to have a full-time zoning inspector at this time? I think that eventually, with the thoughts and the discussion we've had with, you know, doing our own health department and doing the home inspections, because we've talked about that in the past, I think it's a great idea. Should somebody have an occupancy permit to rent their property out? I think it's a great idea. We go in and we look at the property and make sure that it's fit for human habitation and it's ready to go. Great idea, solves a lot of problems. But we're not there yet. And we're not gonna be there for a while, it looks like, but we're getting there. So having somebody on a full-time basis right now and paying them this kind of money is, you know, I'm a little bit divided on this right now. Again, if you look at the wage schedules of the staff, the superintendents, you know, it's pretty close there. And when you look at a zoning inspector, somebody has to have a good knowledge and understanding of construction and those kind of things. And there isn't a specific degree for that, but there are people who have degrees in business and degrees with, you know, engineering or whatever that are in a lot of the zoning positions now. But are we in the position right now to hire a full-time zoning inspector without having our own health department and without having something for them to do all year long? I think we're looking at, we don't have enough for them to do at this point in time, that's all I'm saying. And I think the rate, if you want somebody of quality, I think you're gonna have to pay that kind of money, I do. But we're not there yet. I don't think we're there right now. Anyone else? Mr. Alberti?
One last comment. I understand what you're saying too, Mr. Mayor. You hire a person who is qualified and maybe has some experience at doing this and who is degreed. As Mr. Bariak's point, we don't agree on a whole lot anymore, but I do agree with his point about maybe getting somebody out of college or maybe someone who's retired that you could get for a decent price. That being said, I'm a firm believer that, to Mr. Mayor's point, granted, it's a lot of money, but if that person does the job, he'll pay for himself over and over and over and over and over. I'm a big proponent of it aesthetically cleaning up the community. And John's been on this for 4 years, and I agree with it. You know, some people don't think that their property affects other people's property values. Well, it does. That's the bottom line. And I get some people may not have the finance to clean up, but there's things that you can do to your home, simple things, just to make it look presentable. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say, I have questions about all the money we'd be spending also. However, you know, it just seems like we keep on coming up with more and more money to spend now. Maybe that money's there, but I'm just saying it makes me a little bit leery. But if we were to hire somebody, I want to have a little more say. And this isn't so much different than the federal government, where you have the Congress go and the president can veto it. You know, if you do the ultimate hiring and you don't like who we have, then we go back to square one and we have to find somebody else until you're satisfied. But I want to have a little bit of say over who we're going to be paying all this money to and what credentials they're bringing to the table. And I'd like to do interviews and come to some kind of consensus and then present it to you. And if you're happy with it, then we're good to go.
I do agree with you, Mr. Drew, but we don't have that option at this point in time by the charter. That is his responsibility. I do agree that if you could change it, I think that would be, but right now, the charter, the hiring of that person is his responsibility, and we don't have a say in it, unfortunately. Mr. Attorney Fritz, did you want to interject?
I was going to address pretty much what you had suggested, sir. There's two things in the charter I want to bring up. It says that the zoning administrator shall be appointed and removed by city manager and serve under the supervision of the city manager. And the zoning administrator shall be chosen solely on the basis of technical and administrative qualifications. So that's the phrase that kind of keeps the city manager in a position where he's making sure he's hired someone qualified for it, but he's the one that does the hiring and firing of that position by charter.
Mr. Bariak.
I know this has been a touchy issue in the past, but to Mr. Beer's point, I would like to see if there's not enough work, maybe there would be if we went down and talked about contractor registration. Not only to protect the businesses and help the businesses and community, but to protect the citizens from getting ripped off. And the funding, like Gerard and the rest of them get, would help offset this so-called tremendous salary. And I don't think the salary's that out of line for someone that's gonna get the qualifications that I think the city manager. Look, I'm not gonna defend the city manager to the hilt, but all the calls he's been making have been spot on. And I'm willing to let him have one mistake if he does make a mistake. He's hit the ground running. Let's let him make one mistake if he has. I haven't seen any he's made yet.
Can you come down? The rest of us can talk to you. Please.
Mr. Chairman, could I respond for a moment? Thank you. If you talk to any of the superintendents of the city of Newton Falls, I want working for the city of Newton Falls to be an uplifting experience. I want it to be positive, and I want people to feel good about going to work every day. But one thing is true, and I think every employee of the city of Newton Falls will understand that this message has been conveyed loud and clear and adhered to since I've arrived. And that is that everybody who works for the city of Newton Falls better put in an honest day's work and better achieve the target goals that we give them. Our staff meetings that we have every single Monday are to bring that information out into the open. And the superintendents have done an outstanding job of making sure that that message is carried out. Now, in the case of the individual that's a code enforcement officer, that's a message that's carried even more clearly because it's not filtered by a superintendent. That person will be working under my direction directly. And as you can tell, I have little patience with not fulfilling completely our objectives here in this town. The citizens deserve that. And sort of playing off the point that was made by Councilman Alberini, what value do you put in achieving some of these goals? The things we talked about at the very beginning of this meeting, where the mayor said, well, maybe we won't have that much work when things slow down, the winter time comes. We're going to be tearing down houses. This person's going to be very much involved in that. And this is going to be the busiest office of activity in our community, with the exception of the city manager's office.
Anyone else? Mr. Svet?
Are the annual receipts for the planning and zoning office? I don't know if we've ever received that.
Don't know the answer to that question. To the finance director, I don't know if are you talking about for permits?
Yeah, permits.
And applications?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's
That goes to finance. All receipts are required by law to go to the finance department, and we deposit that.
he's trying to figure out how much it is, though.
Oh, it depends on there's a fee schedule.
Well, I know that, I'm just talking
Annually
about the aggregate
speaking.
number
Yeah,
for, like,
yeah.
say, last year.
I would have to research that and let me get back to you at the
Yeah,
next meeting
sure.
with that
Because I'd like to
report.
see that department self-funded, if at all possible.
Well, you know, by the way, to that point, the mayor and I have talked about this just a couple of days ago. That's something I really would want to take a look at. It's related, especially to the issue we talked about for the grass cutting. We have permit fees and fees for various things related to zoning applications and so forth. But there are many communities in which that department more than pays for itself. Now, if enforcement's aggressive, it generates fees. And that's partly why our request to have the judge help us interface with these people helps make that happen. So, yeah, I think it can. In most communities, code enforcement more than pays for itself. Housing code, building code enforcement. Now, this is a smaller community, but it also means our target goal in terms of the cost of the zoning enforcement officer is lesser.
Anyone else? I'll finish it up with this. I will state I am absolutely opposed to contractor registration at this point in time with what's going on in our community. I don't think that for what contractor registration covers, we don't have those issues. The other thing I'll say is I was with a gentleman the other day, and a police officer came by. He had just stopped to do his job, and he got a lot of flack for it while he was doing it. And I was standing there, and he stopped on the way by, and he goes, Mr. Mayor, he says, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He goes, I just want to clarify something. And he asked me a question, and I said, well, you're absolutely correct in what you did. He says, wow. He said, man, did I get beat up over that. So I told him, nice job, and thanks for what you do, and continued on. Wasn't more than 3 minutes later, the actual property owner came by, and he didn't know who I was, and I didn't tell him because he wasn't very happy. And he was yelling and screaming about, and you know, the police department and what he had done and what he was doing. And unfortunately, the place is deplorable. It's just deplorable. And he said that your enforcement of this stuff, this is why people don't want to come to this community. This is why people are leaving this community, because you're enforcing this stuff, and this is wrong. Well, the reason people are leaving is because it looks like a trash hole in spots. And, you know, these things need to be cleaned up. And I compliment the officer for doing his job, and after listening to this guy, I'm sure he got an earful, and the officer was absolutely correct in what he did. So we have those issues out there, and we need to correct them, and they need to be addressed. Roll, please.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Savet?
Yes.
Mr. Beer?
No.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Mr. Stemmer?
Abstain.
Motion passes. Would the clerk please read ordinance 2019-14?
An 49, establishing pay rates and positions for
Yeah,
employees
this
in
is
the
who
city of Newton Falls, Ohio.
Is there a motion to accept ordinance 2019-14? Second?
Second.
Discussion.
Honorable Mayor and members of council, as we stated at the last meeting, the Finance Department did an analysis of nearby communities. Also, we've been having a little difficulty in hiring for our street department, but we basically found that our rates are lower compared to our peer communities, and we're asking that we establish these new rates for the part-time laborers and the part-time meter readers.
Discussion from council. Roll, please.
Mr. Savett? Yes. Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Mr. Stumpert? Mr. Burdick?
Yes.
Would the clerk please read ordinance 2019-15?
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Braceville Township in reference to annexation.
Is there a motion to accept ordinance 2019-15?
So moved.
Second? Discussion? Mr. Beer?
I'd just like to say that I think you're doing a great thing here. I don't think it was the easiest thing that could be accomplished, but I'm glad to see that we have the township wanting to work with us, and I commend you for that.
Anyone else? Roll, please.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Abstain.
Mr. Stumpert?
Yes.
Mr. Burdick?
Abstain.
Mr. Savett?
Yes.
Motion passes. Under new business, would the clerk please read ordinance 2019-16?
An ordinance authorizing the settlement of agreement with regards to electric costs to Newton Falls, Ohio School District.
Is there a motion to accept 2019-16? Second?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Bariak?
Yes, I've thought about this all weekend, and I support the schools, but with the chance, we're doing a study, and with the chance that we might have to raise the electric bills, and the amount of money that we've already, I think this started out, if I'm wrong, $900,000, and we forgave $750,000. Is that right, Mrs. Munson? Do you have that figure?
I don't have the figure right in front of me.
Does that sound right? Something?
It's approximately correct.
So that left $250,000. And out of that, there's, every dollar counts right now. And since everybody's budget's tight, and I don't want to see, look, for my constituents, I don't want to see the rates raised for my constituents or the village of Newton Falls. Right now, I think, even though I support the schools, I have to think about who I took an oath for. And I took an oath for the village and its residents. And there's a lot of people that are just making ends meet right now. And God forbid, and they're also, over the health insurance, everybody took, over the past administration, health insurance, we took $154,000 knock on that. And that was divided amongst the departments. And each department had to give up so much per department. They took a knock on that. So everybody's given something. And I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to, I took an oath for the village and for the constituents of my ward, and I'm gonna vote no, that I'm not going to forgive it tonight.
Anyone else? Mr. Beer?
Well, I understand what John's saying, however, I feel that the school it's neither township nor city, it's all of our kids go there. And the school's having extremely hard times, and, they didn't pass the tax for it. The amount of money that we're talking about is, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money in so far as I don't think it's going to make a difference in whether we have a rate raise or not. And I really feel that the school could use our help, and I will vote for this.
Mr. Alberini?
Yeah, as you know, and you, Mr. Lynch, know, we've spent a lot of time with Superintendent Paul Woodard. What a great person. I just love the guy to death. He shared with us his personal trials and tribulations in getting tax revenue into the schools to keep them open. And I think this is a small part the city needs to do for the school system. Who knows, in 5 years, it could be Lordstown school system here. It could be Southeast school system here. It could be Southington school system here. So I'm concerned about it, even though I don't have any young kids that could attend school. I do have grandchildren, but I think I hear something playing back there in the back. But I think it's important for us to do our due diligence and help the school out as best we can. Look, that's the future for us right now. Them kids in that school are the future for us, and I'm not willing to turn my back on them. And I took an oath to the residents of the city as well, and I believe they would want us to support our schools.
May I ask the amount of the forgiveness at this time?
Sure, I'd like to address that, and may I be recognized, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Yes, the number that Mr. George talked about really wasn't an accurate total, although I think he was kind of summarizing. The dollar amount is approximately $77,000, so I want you to understand why. If you all look at the ordinance in front of you, Section 1 says it is to modify to forgive all payments as of March 1st, 2019. So we're already in May, coming up on June. So this is somewhat retroactive. I think the amount that's on a monthly basis they're paying is about $2,400 a month, Madam Finance Director. So the amount as of March 1st, 2019 is approximately $77,000.
Where are we on the rate study? Are we halfway? I know this doesn't have anything to do with this, but it does have to do with electric. Can I ask that, Mayor?
Well, the rate study is underway, but Councilman, there are a lot of components in what determines what we should do with our rates, even after a rate study. Because a rate study will make certain presumptions and certain assumptions as it relates to certain past practices carrying forward. And without going to great detail, I've actually had a meeting or two with folks from AMP Ohio. And quite frankly, the mayor and I have had some, what I'll mildly describe as contentious conversations with folks from AMP Ohio, because we feel that our source rates, that is the cost of electricity we're paying for to begin with, is at a level which is too high. So make no mistake about it. I'm actually fighting right now to have a reduction in our electric rates. Can we pull it off? I'm not sure. The rate study will be a component part of our making that determination. But the fact of the matter is that the rate study, I don't know, could we say it's about halfway through? Is that one way of putting it? I'm not sure.
Everything from the finance and utility office to the consultant is done. It's all with the electric department, and there's some things that they have to do some planning and analysis, capital improvement projects. But all the number crunching and the analysis, the billings for the past 5 years, and our office is done. We've worked a lot of hours on that rate
But it
study.
will be the consultant that gives us feedback. But the consultant doesn't tell us what to do with our rates.
Right.
You determine what happens with our rates.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Will this have any effect on future capital projects? With that $750,000, will that make a difference on any future capital projects? Either pushing them further out in years or not doing them at all because of the,
No, because of a one-time $77,000 forgiveness to the Newton Falls Public School System, no.
Okay.
Quite frankly.
okay.
Just to further the discussion on the rates, the AMP Ohio has a new economic development director that works specifically for AMP and meets with member communities to work on economic development projects. And I met her in Columbus last week, and our first conversation was rates. And she has contacted the city, and we are working to set up a meeting with her also. But we have had some very aggressive meetings with AMP on our utility rates, and we will continue those meetings with AMP. They're a little slow to get back to us. but we will continue to keep aware that we're not very happy with the rates. Mr. Semper?
I'd just like to say that I have several children in the school district, and that I will support this tonight because of that. I do not anticipate a rate hike based on what I've the information that I've been given. Now, should that come down the road, I don't know, but based on what I see here, I don't feel that that's gonna happen. Thank you.
What else? Mr. Beer?
Mr. Lynch, if things keep going backwards and there's no levies and so on, and the school fails, we won't get any of that money, will we? I mean, whoever they merge with isn't going to assume that debt, right?
I don't know the answer to that question, but it's just common sense to say that those that don't have the ability to pay usually don't.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, I just want to make a point that, things are not good with the school right now. And it's like, if we don't do everything we can to help them, that makes sense that we should forgive them the $77,000, because we may not get it anyway if things don't go right.
Anyone else? Roll, please.
Mr. Alberini? Yes. Mr. Stemper?
Yes.
Mr. Boryak?
No.
Mr. Savet?
Yes.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Motion passes. Would the clerk please read ordinance 2019-17?
An ordinance amending section 1115.03 of the codified ordinances concerning combination of adjacent lots.
Do a motion to accept ordinance 2019-17?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Savet?
This is actually a question for the law director. Can I actually vote on this one? Since I passed this at planning and zoning?
Same thing, you doesn't vote any of your lots. I mean,
Okay.
even the planning zone does not prohibit you from voting on this.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you're fine.
Thank you for asking. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, it's kind of. I just heard him say something. Did you?
He was just asking if he
What
could
is
vote.
this now?
Was it?
He was
did it-
asking if he could vote, yeah.
Did it go through
Planning
planning and zoning?
Yes, I think it
Okay.
did, yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
What ended up happening is there was, planning and zoning's been getting repeated, people coming in having one lot or two lot next to one another, and it's a process that costs them time, energy, and money, and it was not that zoning doesn't have a time for it, but in order to make things simpler for our citizens, because there's some vacant lots people have next door they're putting in, instead of having everything going through planning and zoning for these 3 or 4 or 5 lots put together, they suggested just absolve that authority and pass it on to the city manager. If you look at this, it also indicates we have to comply with all the codes and all the requirements. So the city manager does a quick review, make sure he may run across my desk, but the whole idea is to simplify for the citizens.
Mr. Stemper?
I may abstain from this because I have a constituent in my ward in which I believe, I don't know if it's a conflict of interest or not, just because.
Well, everybody probably has somebody in their ward that wants to do this. I mean, so unless there's some financial reward that comes back to you, you're free to vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Boryak?
Hasn't this always been council's job to, after it comes from planning and zoning, for council to vote on this? Is that, no?
Now, the process has been, if 2 lots want to be conjoined.
Planning and zoning would send it to us?
No, so planning and zoning has the authority to agree to it. It's part of their, planning and zoning has the right to approve it. If they approved it, just, they don't have to come, they have to come to you to change a planning or zoning ordinance. But the ordinances, you've granted them the power to combine lots previously. So it does not, each one does not come before this council.
Okay.
Anyone else? Roll, please.
Mr. Stemper?
Yes.
Mr. Boryak?
Yeah.
Mr. Savet?
Yes.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Would the clerk please read Resolution 28-2019?
Resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into and execute a contract with David DiCristofaro Associates LLC for development services.
Do a motion to accept Resolution 28-2019?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. It's about ready to close that one down. Discussion? We'll slow it to gun there. All right, discussion on that. Any discussion? No discussion, roll please.
Mr. Barrier?
Recuse.
Mr. Savet?
Yes.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Abstain.
Mr. Stemper?
Yes.
That motion passes. Would the clerk please read Resolution 29-2019?
Resolution accepting the amount and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
Accept Resolution 29-2019?
So moved.
Second? Second. Discussion?
Honorable Mayor and members of council, this is the 2020 tax budget, which is required by law that we have to submit this annually each year. The deadline is basically by July 15th, so we're ahead of the ballgame. So there is an exhibit attachment. It basically shows the general fund, and then it will show the police pension fund, which is because of the property tax involved, which is Schedule 1. It basically will show 2018-19, and the last column is 2020. And then the Schedule 2 is basically all the remaining funds. Basically, it will show what we expect for a carryover beginning balance, what we anticipate for revenue in the year 2020. Then we try to plan on how much expenditures we will have in the basically total estimated expenditures and encumbrance for the year. Then the next portion of the tax budget is talking about our bonds that we have, our debt. And the purpose of this is to set our tax rates with the Budget Commission. And right now, the city of Newton Falls has 2 revenue mortgage bonds for the sewer. We have an A and a B, which is with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So it will show that revenue bond A, we have an outstanding amount of $4,226,900, and revenue mortgage B series for the sewer plant has still outstanding $1,879,100. Now this mortgage revenue bonds for the sewer plant will not be paid off until the year 2048. The next largest piece of debt that the city will have is what is called the Electric System Bond Anticipation Note, a BAN. It's an annual debt that we renew each year, and at the end of this calendar year for 2020, the outstanding amount will be $1,160,000. We're planning on paying off $235,000 each year. However, for 2020, the debt may increase because we're talking about upgrading the substation, which could be an additional $5 million project. But we have to wait on our cost of service study. In addition, this tax budget is available through the Finance Department. We had to advertise this, so we're following all of our legal requirements on this. So I've just request you guys pass this to be in compliance.
Any discussion from council? Roll please.
Mr. Savet?
Abstain?
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Mr. Stemper?
Yes.
Mr. Barrier?
Yes.
Would the clerk please read Resolution 30-2019?
Resolution authorizing all necessary action to apply for and accept the Ohio Department of Natural Resources State of Ohio Nature Works grant.
The motion to accept Resolution 30-2019?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Discussion?
Could I have some input from the
Yes, dear Honorable Mayor and members of council, on June 1st, the city of Newton Falls will be applying for playground equipment at the main city park. Approximately what we're looking at is a multi-play structure that will have 5 slides. It will have climbing structures to this. It will have an approximately 8 to 10 swing set structure with this. There is going to be a tiger figurine that the children can play on, as well as some balancing items. This is just phase 1, so we're looking also at a Kaboom grant and other playground grants as long as with this. So this is just phase 1. Approximately cost of the playground equipment is $74,000. This grant will have a 25% match.
Mr. Stemper?
Set up a weight limit?
Big seats for adults. Sorry. Anyone else? Roll, please. Yes, sir.
Just make sure you check with vendors. Sometimes they do provide grants for recreational equipment, like Play World Mid-States.
Yeah, we are, may I be recognized,
Yes, sir.
recognized? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we do have talked to, become aware of the vendor programs. You know, playground equipment, it's a strange thing. This isn't your grandmother's playground. The cost of playground equipment has been driven up almost primarily because of insurance risk. The plaintiff's lawyers, with all,
It's always the lawyer's fault.
it's always lawyers' fault, I should know. The amount of risk that's involved, and the number of things that have to be changed structurally. Years ago, you could put a very great, beautiful piece of playground equipment and just put it on top of asphalt and concrete. Can't do that anymore. And then there are a number of other elements to the thing as well. That's why the finance director has been very judicious in not only seeking out the grant, but going through a vendor screening to make sure that we are absolutely protected. And I will say one other last thing about this. When I became the city manager, I said I wasn't only committed to the idea of making sure we are aggressive about our road program. As you know, it's much more aggressive this year and will continue to be aggressive. But also as it relates to our parks, I think it was Mr. Kropp that was here just a couple weeks ago talking about some of the things we need to do in our parks. And I want really our parks to be places of beauty and inspiration. And when it comes to our kids, having great equipment like this is very important. And I commend the finance director for her help in getting this done. More grant applications will be coming. The YSU individual, by the way, is coming on Thursday to begin his work. So you'll see a lot more grant applications coming your way.
Any other questions? Roll, please.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberti?
Yes.
Mr. Stemper?
Yes.
Mr. Moryak?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. Mr. Clerk, please read Resolution 31-2000.
A resolution authorizing the city to request qualifications to conduct water and sewer cost of service studies and enter into all necessary contracts.
So moved.
Second? Second? Second. Discussion? Mr. Lynch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Novotny from our sewer division and Jeff Hawkins from water division have been beating the drum for a rate study for both those departments over our last several staff meetings. As you know, we just had this discussion in the electrical area. A rate study doesn't mean a rate increase. A rate study means you're trying to see if your rates are accurate, that is, applicable to your actual costs. Sometimes a rate study can result in a reduction. I will tell you, though, that both departments need some upgrading taking place. In the wastewater department, the imposition of new regulations from the Environmental Protection Agency have really been something that we've been confronted with over the years, especially with the cross connections between sanitary lines and storm lines. As you sit here, members of council, you probably have heard this before, but you should all be aware, you've got storm lines that are connected directly into sanitary lines in this city. That is a major no-no when it comes to the EPA. In our water department, you know that we had that, I'll call it a opportunity for crisis, never became a crisis, when we had difficulty with high levels of turbidity in our river. I think it's, Madam Clerk, is it next week sometime, next Friday or next Thursday, we have a meeting with the EPA scheduled. So we will have an opportunity to have a full overview report from the EPA on that miniature event that occurred. I think it was in February sometime. But the EPA is looking very carefully at our water program as well, and we may be having to go to a pure chlorine program instead of a chloramine program. The only reason I bring this to your attention is this. You, as a legislative authority, are legally responsible that we would satisfy our EPA requirements in both wastewater and in the water department. Our rate study will give us an opportunity to incorporate all of those requirements into our rates. But we're fighting to keep them down, But, you've heard this phrase that the Congress of the United States has put a halt to unfunded mandates. Well, that's not true. The federal EPA increases a requirement and doesn't give us the money to comply with that requirement. Now, there are grants available. There's funding available to help soften the blow. But in the final analysis, what the folks from the EPA will tell you is that you've got a moral obligation to protect the health of our citizens. And so we try to get into compliance, and I'm hoping our rate study will show us that we can be creative and at least soften the blow a little bit. But these rate studies are long overdue.
Any other questions? Roll, please.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
When was the last time we did a rate study for Newton Falls?
For both of these areas,
Approximately 5 to 6 years ago.
Do you anticipate, what, Mr. Lynch, what do you anticipate? Can you give us any kind of, anything?
anything whatsoever?
Well, I'm
False
asking Anna
intelligent
Munson
information?
then. I'm asking Ms. Munson. Ms. Munson, have you seen the figures? Can you give us anything at all? No.
No.
Well,
What's the revenue in that right now?
Just so you know, Mr. Councilman Bariak, the revenues for the water department are strong right now. Revenues for the water department are strong.
What I heard.
We'll be generating additional revenue from the Blueprint for Prosperity. Some have called it the Blueprint for Disaster because they're asking us to produce more water. And what I've said to all of you, the priority is providing clean water and clean environmental protection for the citizens of Newton Falls first. I've asked the law directors to take a look at our contract with the Blueprint for Prosperity. So if you ask for a prediction, what's the rate study going to say? Why do we hire consultants to do rate study if we already know what the answer is? We have to wait and see what the consultant says.
In other words, Mr. Lynch, we don't want to bite off more out there than we can chew.
That's a fair statement.
Anyone else? Roll, please.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Mr. Stumpert?
Yes.
Mr. Correa?
Yes.
Mr. Savett?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Need a motion to accept the Finance Department's April monthly report, credit card report, bank reconciliation, and attachments as presented.
So moved.
Second. Second? Second? Oh, I can't hear up here. Discussion? Thank you. Discussion? Roll, please.
Mr. Stumpert?
Yes.
Mr. Correa?
Yes.
Mr. Savett?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Motion to accept the Police Department's April monthly report and attachments as presented.
So moved.
Second? There you go. All right, discussion? Did somebody want to ask the chief a question?
No, the only thing I want to mention is that the chief and I are working closely with, and the chief is the point man on implementation of our Code Red contract. And it's moving along very quickly. And in fact, the chief and I talked about the idea of doing a Code Red test within the next 2 to 3 weeks or so. And so keep an eye on your cell phones. You're going to see a little test coming.
Mr. Stemper?
That or do?
Yes.
Can you?
Everybody will be given a notice, and the notice is to put an app on your phone to participate in Code Red. But in addition to that, we already have a database of phone numbers, and that's where this test is going to come in handy. So people will be getting notifications about how to sign up for the app, and we'll be judicious in that testing. But my expectation is, with the concern for safety folks have in this community, I think it'll be about a 90% participation rate. There's no reason not to participate in Code Red. It's not like these apps you've heard where they're actually taking information from you and spying on you. This is merely to make sure you're up to date about important things.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Mr. Savett?
Yes.
Mr. Alberti?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Public comments? Mr. Alberini?
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Beer?
I have nothing.
Mr. Stempert? Mr. Bariak?
I have nothing.
Mr. Savet?
I have nothing.
Attorney Fritz?
Why would I change that wonderful series we have? I have nothing.
Mr. Lynch?
Ditto.
I will just end by saying this. I heard a lot of things tonight that are very interesting for the community. We have some people out there, we call them cave people, and citizens against virtually everything. And they want to post a lot of things about hobnobbing with this and hobnobbing with that and the things that I do. And tonight is a perfect example of how getting outside of this community and going to meetings and going to meet with people benefit this community. I know I said this before when this first came up about the Pasquale property, but just by a stroke of luck, at a meeting I was sitting at, were some people from the Environmental Design Group. That's a company that does economic development and stuff. And we sat down and started BSing about what was going on in Newton Falls, and I mentioned that. And right away, they said, gee, you might be able to qualify as a Class C city or a lot and have the state pay for all that. We didn't know that, but we knew that, there was some cleanup might have to do, but we didn't know about it. So by going to these meetings, I bring the information back, we start doing some research. Lo and behold, we might just qualify for that, and it'd be a great benefit to us. Last week when I was in Columbus at the OEDA 360, we met with Lieutenant Governor John Husted. And I was the only one that got a private conversation with him because he didn't take questions. So I walked out in the lobby, and after the guy stood there and says, don't get arrested, because the three bodyguards are a lot bigger than the people I saw. He come walking by, and I asked him if I could ask him a question. He said, sure. And I talked to him about the rail, about the Subsurface Rail Transportation Board, and what the state of Ohio could do to help us with this rail spur that everybody says we've forgotten, which we have not forgotten. This thing was done a long time ago, and we didn't have a choice, we don't have a say, and neither does any other community, but I haven't given it up yet. And so I did send off a communication to Lieutenant Governor John Husted. He turned it over to the Ohio Department of Transportation, and I'm waiting to hear back from them to see if there's anything the state of Ohio could do from their level to reach up to the federal government to help us with this spur. The state of Ohio is really, really excited about economic development, and they're really excited about transportation infrastructure, and they're real excited about rail. And, this is our only spur. So I've talked to him, I got a chance to talk to the Lieutenant Governor about that, and I also had a couple of chances to talk to Lydia Mihalic, who is now the Executive Director of the Ohio Department of Administrative Services. I did talk to her about the census a couple of times. So everybody can talk about what they want, but these meetings are very, very useful. They're very, the networking is just absolutely tremendous of what's out there. And all you got to do is be around in the right place and ask the right questions to the right people and see if we can utilize some of that information. So I think tonight's a perfect example of what these meetings mean to this community and what we're able to accomplish by getting out there and talking with our peers and our network people, and we'll keep doing it. Is there any need to go into executive session? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll, please.
Mr. Savett?
Yes.
Mr. Beer?
Yes.
Mr. Alberini?
Yes.
Mr. Stempert?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant?
Doesn't matter.
Already know.
Hey, David.
I've seen that stuff.
Hey, Dave.
We just